Hey everyone! Tonight we're diving headfirst into a time-traveling adventure that'll jolt you out of your cozy blanket, no matter how heavy your eyelids feel. The Nazca Lines, those massive carvings in the Peruvian desert, are calling spiders, monkeys, birds, all screaming up at the stars. Who made them? And why did they etch these things like they were texting someone out in the cosmos? Before you snuggle up, hit that like button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's awesome to know who's joining us from all corners of the globe. Picture this. You wake up not on your soft bed with a faint whiff of Starbucks coffee, but on a stiff straw mat in a dusty hut in the Nazca Desert, around 200 BCE. Your nose is assaulted by the dry, choking smell of dust, like someone dumped the whole desert down your throat. Outside, the wind howls past rocks, sounding like a creepy playlist no one asked for. Your head's pounding, probably from chugging too much chicha last night, that fermented corn beer the Nazca love, bitter and strong like a punch to the face. You stumble to your feet, bare soles hitting the freezing dirt floor, and it hits you. Today's a work day, but no laptops or deadlines here. You're heading out to the desert to draw. Draw what? A spider the size of a football field, one that only makes sense from the sky. You step out of the hut, and the sun slaps you in the face. The Nazca Desert doesn't mess around, blazing hot by day, bone-chilling by night. Your crew, a group of sun-baked Nazca folks with eyes sharp as knives, is gathered around a pile of rocks. No iPhones or Bluetooth speakers here, just crude tools, wooden sticks, plant fiber ropes, and a few sharpened stones. A guy named Kusi, who's always bragging he's the best artist in the village, is barking orders and pointing like he's directing a blockbuster. "Watch it, don't mess up the lines," he yells, voice hoarse from dust. You smirk, thinking, yeah, like I've never drawn a straight line before. But this isn't sketching on paper. Your canvas is the desert itself. The ground here is unique, a dark layer of pebbles over lighter soil. Scrape away the top layer, and you reveal pale yellow earth, creating crisp, vivid lines. Sounds easy, right? Nope. You kneel, gripping a stone, and start scraping. Each stroke sends pain shooting from your wrist to your shoulder. Dust flies into your eyes, your nose, clinging to your hair like some cursed powder. 5 minutes in, you're ready to quit, flop down, and dream of an iced latte. But Kusi shoots you a look that says, rest? You'll be kicked off the team. So why are you out here, baking under the sun, choking on dust, drawing shapes you don't even fully understand? The Nazca people, who made these lines from about 200 BCE to 600 CE, didn't leave a single note. No books, no letters, not even a Kusi was here scratched into a rock. All we've got are the massive drawings. Over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and 70 animal figures, stretching across 450 square kilometers of desert. Some are so big you need to soar above to see them clearly. Fly? Back then? Get real. The Nazca had no drones, no hot air balloons. So why draw stuff only visible from the sky? Who was their audience? Gods? Aliens? Or just some unhinged chief showing off? You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and glance around. In the distance, the giant spider is taking shape. Its curving lines look eerie, like it's crawling toward the hazy mountains on the horizon. A chill runs through you, despite the scorching sun. There's something about these lines that unsettles you. They're not just art. They have a purpose. You turn to Kusi, ready to ask, but he's already off yelling at another group. Instead, you nudge Yana, a wiry girl who's always chewing coca leaves to stay alert. "Why are we doing this?" you whisper, nodding at the spider. Yana shrugs, spitting out a red glob of coca juice. "To talk to the sky," she says vaguely. The sky always listens. The sky? You look up. The sun's blinding, not a cloud in sight. But you know that at night, this desert turns into a light show. Stars blaze like someone scattered diamonds across a black velvet sheet. The Nazca worship nature, sun, mountains, rivers, and especially the stars. Some archaeologists, like Maria Reich, who spent her life studying the Nazca Lines, think these drawings were a kind of astronomical calendar. The straight lines might point to constellations or mark where the sun rises and sets on key days, like the solstice. That spider you're carving? It could represent a constellation or a god tied to rain, something the Nazca desperately prayed for in this parched desert. But you're no archaeologist. You're just a regular Nazca drenched in sweat, back aching, stomach growling because you skipped breakfast. You glance at Yana, fishing for more. What does the sky say back? You ask, a hint of sarcasm in your voice. She grins, a sly half-smile like she knows you're skeptical. It talks about water, about crops, about what's coming. Then she turns back to scraping dirt, leaving you with a head full of questions. Water? In this bone-dry wasteland, water's worth more than gold. You think of the cracked riverbeds, the failed harvests, the endless prayers by firelight. Are these lines a plea? A message to the gods or the stars begging for rain? The sun climbs higher, roasting your skin. You hear kids from the village laughing, darting past with kites made of dried leaves. For a second, you're jealous. They don't have to scrape dirt all day. But then you remember, even the kids know these lines matter. They grow up hearing tales of sky gods, of giant beasts guarding the tribe. You wonder, are you part of something epic, or just slaving away for someone's crazy idea? The question lingers as you keep scraping, stroke after stroke. Each line is a whisper to the sky. But does the sky answer? Or does it just stare down, cold and indifferent, as it has for centuries? You smirk, thinking, if this is how the Nazca chatted with the universe, they were way more patient than you waiting for a text back from a crush. As the sun sets, painting the desert in fiery orange, a cold breeze sweeps through. Something's coming. Something bigger than the spider you're drawing. Are you ready to face it? Or do you just want to crawl back to your hut, wrap up in a blanket, and pretend it's all a dream? The sun dips below the horizon, and the Nazca Desert transforms into a blazing orange masterpiece, like someone spilled a bucket of paint across the sky. You're still standing there, clutching your scraping stone, sweat dried into crusty patches on your skin. The faint tang of last night's chicha lingers, mixing with the dusty earth and the sweat of everyone around you. The crew starts to scatter, trudging back to the village, their footsteps heavy on the desert floor. The kids' laughter has faded, leaving only the wind's eerie whistle, now sounding like a whispered threat. You glance at the giant spider in the distance, its lines blurring in the twilight. It looks more alive, like it might scuttle off any second. You shiver, unsure if it's the cold or something deeper. Back at your hut, you collapse onto the straw mat, your legs throbbing like you just ran a marathon barefoot. Outside, campfires spark to life, the sharp smell of smoke stinging your nose. You hear the steady beat of drums, slow and haunting, like the desert's own heartbeat. Villagers gather around the fires, their shadows dancing on the ground. You want to join them, but your empty stomach's throwing a fit. Yana, the coca-chewing girl, appears out of nowhere and tosses you a flat corn cake, hard as a rock. Eat, she says deadpan. You won't last tomorrow if you don't. You bite into it, your teeth grinding. It's bland dry, but you chew like it's your last meal, washing it down with a swig of warm water from a chipped clay jug. While you're chewing, you notice a crowd near one of the fires, not eating or singing, but listening to an old man tell stories. His name's Inti, a shaman with wild white hair and eyes that burn right through you. His voice is low and deliberate, each word like a stone dropped into a still pond. You tug at Yana's sleeve, whispering, "What's he talking about?" She shrugs, but her eyes gleam with curiosity. "The stars. What they want." You smirk, ready to joke that the stars probably don't care about your terrible corn cake. But Inti's gaze shuts you up. He's talking about the lines, about why you and the whole village are sweating under the sun to make them. You inch closer, squeezing through the crowd. The smell of smoke blends with coca leaves and sweat, creating a strange, warm, suffocating scent. Inti raises a wooden staff carved with a bird, pointing to the sky. "We draw so the gods can see," he says, his voice echoing. "We draw so the sky doesn't forget us." You look up, where stars are starting to twinkle. They're so bright you almost feel them moving, like invisible eyes watching everything. Inti says the lines aren't just pictures, they're prayers. Every line, every animal, is a message to the gods of rain, crops, life itself. That spider you worked on today? It's not just a spider. It's a symbol of a water spirit, a deity the Nazca believe brings rain to this barren land. You swallow hard, the corn cake lodging in your throat. Praying for rain? In a place where clouds are rarer than a quick reply from your crush? But then you think of the bone-dry rivers, the withered cornfields, the desperate looks in the villagers' eyes when the dry season drags on. Water is everything here. No water, no corn. No corn, no chicha, no food, no nothing. You glance at Yana, ready to ask if she buys this, but she's locked on Inti, clutching her coca leaf pouch like it's a lifeline. Inti's voice drops, almost a whisper. He says the lines aren't just prayers, they're a map of the sky. Some modern scholars, like Gerald Hawkins, suggest the straight lines might align with constellations or mark astronomical events. Some point directly to where the sun rises on the winter solstice, when the first light hits the desert like a promise of life. The animals, like the spider or a bird, might represent constellations the Nazca watched every night. You frown, trying to wrap your head around it. A sky map drawn on the ground? Sounds insane, but you can't deny the lines are too precise, too perfect to be random. Then Inti says something that sends a chill down your spine. "The stars don't just watch," he says, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "They demand. If we stop drawing, stop praying, they'll stop listening." A cold breeze cuts through, even though the fire's roaring. Demand? What's that supposed to mean? That the gods or the stars or whatever's up there will punish the village if the lines aren't finished? You want to ask, but the crowd starts murmuring. Some nod, others bow their heads like they're scared. You whisper to Yana, "Is he for real?" She doesn't answer, just chews her coca leaves harder, eyes fixed on Inti. The night deepens, and the storytelling ends. The villagers drift back to their huts, but you can't sleep. The drums echo faintly, blending with the wind. You lie on your mat, staring at the hut ceiling, trying to picture the lines from above. What do they look like? A spider, a bird, or something bigger, scarier? You think of modern theories, ideas from centuries after your time. Some, like Eric von Daniken, even claimed the Nazca Lines were made by aliens, that they're runways for spaceships. You scoff, thinking if aliens had tech to get here, they wouldn't need dirt runways. But the idea still creeps you out. If not gods, if not aliens, then who came up with these lines? And why do they make you feel like you're being watched? Morning comes, and you wake up feeling heavy. Inti's stories are still swirling in your head. You step outside, and the sun hits you like its usual rude slap. Today, your team's got a new job, drawing a straight line, stretching kilometers across the desert. Kusi, the self-proclaimed artist extraordinaire, is there, holding a rope and shouting orders. "Keep it straight. Don't screw it up," he barks. You glare, thinking if he's so great, why doesn't he do it himself? But you work, because no work means no corn cakes, no chicha, and maybe no place in the village. Drawing a straight line sounds simple, but it's a nightmare. You and the team trudge for hours, pulling the rope to keep the line perfect. Every step is a battle with dust and heat. Your sandals, woven from plant fibers, rub your feet raw, blisters forming. Sweat stings your eyes. You look ahead, where the line stretches to the horizon, and wonder, why? To point at a constellation? To beg for rain? Or to please a god you're not even sure exists? As you're grumbling to yourself, Yana walks over, handing you a jug of water. "Drink, you look like you're about to keel over," she says, half teasing. You take a gulp, warm, earthy, but a lifesaver. "What do you think of Inti's stories?" you ask, keeping your voice low so Kusi doesn't hear. Yana shrugs, but this time she says more. Maybe he's right. Maybe the stars are watching. But if they don't answer, then what? We keep drawing, keep praying. But if the rain doesn't come, her voice trails off, and you catch a flicker of fear in her eyes. Not of gods, but of something real. Hunger, death, despair. You keep working, but Yana's words stick. Every scrape of the dirt feels like a question now. What are you doing? For who? And what if it's all for nothing? As the sun sets again, you stand there, staring at the endless straight line before you. It's beautiful in a weird way, but also terrifying. It's like a promise or a warning. And as you head back to your hut, the wind howls, carrying the smell of dust and a feeling that things are about to get worse. Are you brave enough to keep drawing? Or do you just want to pretend you never heard Inti's tales? The desert night wraps around you like a heavy blanket, thick with the scent of dust and fading campfire smoke. You're back in your hut, sprawled on the straw mat, but sleep's nowhere to be found. The drums from earlier have stopped, but the wind keeps up its eerie hum, sneaking through the cracks in the mud walls. Your muscles ache from hours of scraping dirt, and the blisters on your feet throb with every shift of your body. That corn cake you choke down sits like a brick in your stomach, and the faint aftertaste of earthy water lingers on your tongue. Inti's words echo in your head, stars that demand, gods that might punish. You stare up at the dark ceiling, picturing the spider, the endless straight line, and the sky full of eyes. Are you really part of something bigger, or are you just stuck in a dusty loop, slaving away for a cosmic scam? Morning comes too soon. The sun's first rays creep into the hut, warm but not yet brutal. You drag yourself up, every joint creaking like an old door. Outside, the village is stirring, mothers grinding corn, kids chasing each other with sticks, and the ever-present scent of dust mixing with the faint sweetness of roasted maize. You grab a quick bite of another rock-hard corn cake, washing it down with water that tastes like it's been sitting in a clay jug for a decade. Yana's already outside, leaning against a wall, chewing her coca leaves like they're the secret to eternal energy. "You look like death," she says, tossing you a smirk. "Ready for another day of talking to the sky." You groan, muttering something about needing a vacation, but her laugh cuts you off. "Vacation? Tell that to Kusi." Speaking of the devil, Kusi's voice booms across the village, summoning the crew. Today's task is different. No more straight lines or spider legs. You're working on a new figure, a massive bird, its wings spread wide, like it's about to take off into the stars. You trudge to the worksite, the desert already warming under your feet. The air's dry enough to crack your lips, and every breath feels like inhaling a handful of sand. Kusi's there, as obnoxious as ever, waving a rope and barking orders. "This bird's gotta be perfect," he shouts. "One wrong line, and the gods will have our heads." You roll your eyes, thinking he's more likely to lose his head to his own ego than any god. But you grab your stone and get to work, because the alternative, being shunned by the village, isn't worth thinking about. Scraping the dark pebbles away to reveal the pale earth beneath is starting to feel routine, But the bird's curves are trickier than the spider's legs or the endless straight line. You're on your knees, dragging the stone in slow, deliberate arcs, sweat dripping into the dirt. The sun's climbing, turning the desert into an oven. Your back screams, your hands are raw, and the dust coats your throat like a second skin. You glance at the others, dozens of workers, men and women, young and old, all bent over, scraping in silence. It's eerie, like a cult ritual, everyone moving in sync under Kusi's watchful eye. You wonder how many of them believe in the gods, in the stars, or if they're just here for the corn cakes and a place to sleep. You pause to catch your breath, wiping your face with a dusty hand, and Yana sidles up. She's got that half smirk again, like she's in on a joke you haven't figured out. You ever wonder if we're wasting our time? You ask, keeping your voice low. She spits out a wad of coca juice, the red stain sinking into the dirt. All the time, she says. But then I think about the river. Last year, it didn't flow. Half the village starved. If these lines bring water, I'll scrape dirt till my hands bleed. Her words hit hard. You remember the stories, families eating roots, kids too weak to play, the endless prayers that went unanswered. Suddenly, your blisters don't seem like such a big deal. You get back to work, but Yana's words stick. The bird's wings are taking shape now, each line precise, almost hypnotic. You try to imagine it from above, soaring over the desert like a real bird. The Nazca were obsessed with birds, condors, hummingbirds, pelicans, symbols of freedom, messengers to the gods. Some modern researchers, like Phyllis Petluga, suggest the bird figures might align with specific stars or constellations, maybe even tracking the Pleiades, a cluster tied to the rainy season in ancient cultures. You're no astronomer, but you've seen the Pleiades at night, a tight knot of stars that feels alive, like it's watching. Could this bird be a plea to those stars, a desperate cry for rain? The day drags on, the sun relentless. Your throat's so dry you'd trade your hut for a cold soda. But all you've got is a jug of lukewarm water Yana shares when Kusi's not looking. The bird's almost done, its beak pointing toward a distant ridge. You step back, squinting, and for a moment you feel a strange pride. It's beautiful in a stark, otherworldly way. But that pride sours when you remember Inti's warning about the star's demands. What if the bird's not enough? What if the gods or the stars or whatever's out there want more? Lunchtime brings a brief respite. You sit in the shade of a rocky outcrop with Yana and a few others, chewing more corn cakes and passing around a jug of chicha. The beer's sour, but it dulls the ache in your bones. One of the older workers, a guy named Tupa with a face like cracked leather, starts talking. My grandfather helped draw the monkey, he says, pointing to a distant figure you can barely make out. He said the lines are alive. They carry our voices to the sky. You raise an eyebrow, ready to laugh, but Tupa's dead serious. When we stop drawing, the sky stops listening. And when the sky stops listening, he trails off, staring at the horizon. You wait for him to finish, but he just takes another swig of chicha and goes quiet. The conversation dies, and you're left with an uneasy feeling. The Nazca Lines aren't just art or astronomy, they're survival. The desert's brutal, and the Nazca knew it. Their world was ruled by water, or the lack of it. Modern studies back this up. Some lines lead to ancient aqueducts called puquios, underground channels that brought water from distant mountains. Were the lines a map to these hidden water sources? A ritual to keep them flowing? You glance at the bird, wondering if its beak points to a puquio, a lifeline buried under the dirt. Work resumes, and the afternoon's a blur of dust and pain. Kusi's still yelling, but you tune him out, focusing on the rhythm of scraping. The bird's finished by dusk, and the crew gathers to admire it. In the fading light, it looks alive, its wings glowing against the dark desert floor. Cussy, for once, shuts up, his face soft with something like awe. Even Yana's quiet, her coca leaves forgotten. You feel it too, a strange pull, like the birds calling to something far above. But that feeling twists into dread when you remember the stakes. If this doesn't work, if the rains don't come, the village is screwed. As you head back to the village, the air cools, carrying the scent of dust and distant fires. The stars are out now, brighter than ever, and you can't help but look for the Pleiades. There they are, a tiny cluster, unassuming but powerful. You wonder what the Nazca saw in them. Hope? Fear? A promise? Yana walks beside you, unusually quiet. You think it'll work? You ask, nodding toward the sky. She shrugs, but her voice is low. It better. Last time the rains failed, my brother didn't make it. The words hit like a punch. You want to say something, but your throat's tight, and she's already walking ahead. Back at the hut, you collapse onto your mat, the day's weight pressing down. The wind's picking up, rattling the walls, and you hear faint chanting from the village. Another prayer, another plea. You think about the bird, the spider, the endless lines, and the stars that demand more than you can give. Modern theories swirl in your head, astronomical calendars, water maps, even wild ideas about aliens or lost civilizations. But here, now it's just you, the desert, and a sky that might not care. You close your eyes, but sleep feels like a luxury you can't afford. What's next? Another line, another figure, another day of begging the stars? And what happens when they stop listening for good? You smirk into the darkness, thinking, if the gods want more, they better start pulling their weight, because you're not sure how much longer you can keep this up. You're still here with me, right? If you're digging this so far, drop a question in the comments. I'm dying to know what's going through your head right now. And now, let's keep this journey rolling together. The desert morning greets you with a cruel familiarity. The air already thick with a gritty scent of dust and the faint, sour tang of last night's chicha lingering in your mouth. You're slumped on your straw mat, body screaming from yesterday's labor, the blisters on your feet pulsing like tiny heartbeats. The faint chanting from the village's late-night prayers still hums in your ears, blending with the wind's restless howl outside. You barely slept, your mind tangled in thoughts of the bird you carved, its wings spread toward the stars, and Yana's quiet confession about her brother. The weight of it all presses down, heavier than the desert heat. You drag yourself up, wincing as your joints protest, and step outside. The village is waking. Women pound corn with rhythmic thuds, kids dart around, and the sun creeps over the horizon, promising another day of relentless baking. You grab a corn cake, its texture like chewing gravel, and force it down with a swig of stale water. Yana's already at the usual spot, leaning against a mud wall, her coca leaf pouch dangling from her belt. She looks you over, smirking. You're still alive. Impressive. You mutter something about needing a spa day, but her laugh is sharp, cutting through the morning haze. Spa day? Tell that to the gods. They're the ones calling the shots. Her words sting, reminding you of Inti's tales, the stars that demand, the lines that keep the village alive. You want to ask about her brother, but her eyes are guarded, and you let it drop. Cussy's voice cuts through the village like a whip, summoning the crew. You trudge to the worksite, the desert floor already warm under your raw feet. Today's task is a spiral, a massive, coiling shape that feels like it's mocking your exhaustion. Cussy's there, rope in hand, strutting like he's the king of the desert. This spiral's gotta be flawless, he barks. One slip, and we're all cursed. You roll your eyes, thinking he's more likely to curse you with his bad attitude than any god. But you grab your stone and kneel, the familiar ache settling into your wrists as you start scraping. The dust rises, coating your face, sneaking into your nose, your eyes, your everything. It's like the desert's trying to claim you, one grain at a time. The spiral's curves are a nightmare. Unlike the bird's sweeping wings or the straight line's brutal simplicity, this shape demands precision. You drag the stone in slow, tight arcs, following the rope Kusi's team has staked out. Every muscle burns, and the sun's climbing fast, turning the desert into a skillet. You glance at the others, dozens of workers, their heads bowed, scraping in eerie unison. It's like a trance, everyone moving to the desert's silent rhythm. You wonder how many of them are here because they believe, and how many are just too scared to stop. The Nazca Lines aren't just drawings, they're a pact, a desperate bargain with forces no one fully understands. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and Yana's beside you, her own stone still in hand. "This spiral's giving me a headache," you mutter, half expecting her to laugh. But she's staring at the shape, her face unreadable. "It's not just a spiral," she says quietly. "It's a path. To the water." You frown, waiting for her to explain, but she's already back to work, her movements sharp, almost angry. Water again. Always water. You think of the Puquios, those underground aqueducts Tupa mentioned, hidden channels that carry life from the mountains. Could this spiral be a marker, a guide to one of those lifelines? Modern archaeologists like Rosa Lasapinara have suggested some lines map out water sources, tracing paths to springs or canals. You're no expert, but the idea makes sense. In a place where a single dry season can kill, water's worth more than gold, more than gods. The thought fuels you, and you scrape harder, ignoring the pain shooting up your arms. The spiral's taking shape, its coils tight and hypnotic, like a snake curling around a secret. You try to picture it from above, a dizzying whirl etched into the desert skin. The Nazca loved spirals, symbols of cycles of life, of water's endless flow. Some researchers, like Anthony Avini, argue they might represent the movement of stars or planets, tying the desert to the cosmos. You've seen Venus at dawn, a blazing that feels alive, guiding the morning. Could this spiral be a tribute to that? A plea for the rains that follow the stars' paths? The sun's at its peak now, roasting your back. Your throat's so dry you'd kill for a slushie, but all you got is a shared jug of water, warm and gritty. Yana passes it over, her fingers brushing yours. "Don't die on me," she says, half joking, but there's a flicker of worry in her eyes. You manage a weak grin, taking a sip, and ask, "Why spirals? Why not just draw a big arrow to the water?" She snorts, spitting coca juice into the dirt. "Because the gods don't like easy. They want us to bleed for it." Her words are sharp, but they hit home. The Nazca didn't just survive the desert. They wrestled it, carved their will into its bones. Every line, every spiral, is a fight against oblivion. Work grinds on, the spiral growing under your hands. Kusi's still shouting, but you've learned to filter him out, focusing on the rhythm of your stone. The desert's quiet, save for the scrape of tools and the occasional grunt from a worker. It's hypnotic, almost meditative, until a shadow falls over you. You look up to see Inti, the shaman, standing at the edge of the worksite. His white hair glows in the sunlight, and his eyes are fixed on the spiral, unblinking. The crew slows, glances exchanged, but no one speaks. Inti rarely visits the worksite. He's usually in the village, praying or reading the stars. His presence feels like a storm cloud, heavy with meaning. He steps closer, his staff tapping the ground, and stops beside you. You freeze, stone in hand, heart pounding for no reason you can name. "This spiral," he says, his voice low, "is a doorway." You blink, waiting for more, but he's staring at the shape like it's speaking to him. A doorway? To what? The gods? The stars? The water? You want to ask, but your tongue's stuck, and Inti's already moving on, his staff leaving small divots in the dirt. The crew watches him go, and Kusi, for once, stays quiet. You turn to Yana, whispering, "What was that about?" She shrugs, but her eyes are wide. He sees things we don't. Always has. The spiral's finished by late afternoon, and the crew steps back to admire it. In the slanting light, it's mesmerizing, its coils drawing your eye inward, like a trap. You feel a strange pull, like it's calling to something deep inside you, or something far above. But that feeling sours when you remember Inti's words. A doorway. To what? And what happens if you step through? The Nazca believed in cycles, life, death, water, stars. But they also believed in balance. Every offering had a cost. You think of the stories whispered in the village, of sacrifices made in lean years, of blood spilled to appease the gods. Your stomach twists. Are these lines enough, or do the stars want more? As you head back to the village, the air cools, carrying the scent of dust and distant smoke. The stars are emerging, sharp and unyielding, and you can't help but search for Venus, bright and solitary. You wonder what the Nazca saw in it. Hope? A warning? Yana walks beside you, her silence heavy. You think Inti's right? You ask, voice low. About the doorway? She doesn't look at you, just keeps walking. I think he believes it. That's enough to make it real. Her words chill you, and you fall quiet, the desert's vastness pressing in. Back at the hut, you collapse, the day's labor etched into your bones. The wind's stronger tonight, rattling the walls, and you hear faint drums from the village. Another ritual, another plea. You think of the spiral, its coils burned into your mind, and Inti's cryptic words. Modern theories swirl, water maps, star charts, even wild ideas about ancient astronomers or lost technologies. But here, now it's just you, the desert, and a sky that feels closer than it should. You close your eyes, but the spiral follows you into the dark, spinning, pulling. What's on the other side of that doorway? And if you find out, will you wish you'd stayed on this side? You smirk into the darkness, thinking, if the gods want a doorway, they better be ready to tip for the effort, because you're not sure how much more you've got to give. The night clings to you, heavy with the scent of dust and the faint, acrid bite of smoke from the village fires. You're sprawled on your straw mat, body aching, the spiral's coils still spinning in your mind like a dream you can't shake. Inti's words, a doorway, echo, mingling with the distant thump of drums, and the wind's restless moan outside your hut. Your blisters throb, your throat's raw from days of dust, and the memory of Yana's guarded eyes keeps you from sleep. The stars feel too close tonight, their light seeping through the cracks in the mud walls, like they're pressing down, waiting for something. You roll over, trying to shut it all out, but the desert doesn't let you forget. It's in your bones now, as much a part of you as the lines you've carved. Dawn breaks, sharp and unforgiving. You drag yourself up, every muscle screaming, and step outside. The village hums with early morning life. Women knead corn dough, their hands moving in steady rhythm, while kids weave through the huts, laughing, oblivious to the weight you feel. The air carries the faint sweetness of roasted maize, but it's undercut by the ever-present dust, coating your tongue with every breath. You grab a corn cake, its texture like biting into a brick, and choke it down with water that tastes of clay and time. Yana's at her usual spot, chewing coca leaves, her face unreadable. You look worse than yesterday, she says, tossing you a half smile. The spiral get in your head? You grunt, not ready to admit how much Inti's visit rattled you, and follow her to the worksite. Kusi's already there, his voice cutting through the morning like a blade. Today's task is a new figure, a monkey, its tail curling like a question mark, its limbs splayed as if reaching for the sky. The crew gathers, tools in hand, and you feel the familiar dread settle in. The desert's waking up, the heat already creeping across the ground, and the dust rises with every step. Kusi's waving a rope, shouting about precision, his ego as big as the monkey you're about to carve. "This one's for the rain god," he yells. "Mess it up, and we're all doomed." You mutter under your breath, thinking he's more likely to doom you with his bad directions than any god. But you kneel, stone in hand, and start scraping, the pain in your wrists flaring with every stroke. The monkey's shape is complex, its curves and angles demanding focus. You drag the stone along the desert floor, peeling back dark pebbles to reveal the pale earth beneath. The dust swirls, stinging your eyes, clogging your nose, painting your skin in gritty layers. The sun climbs, turning the desert into a furnace, and your sweat mixes with the dirt, forming a muddy paste on your arms. You glance at the others, dozens of workers, their heads bowed, scraping in eerie silence. It's like a dance, each movement part of a ritual no one questions. You wonder how many of them feel the same gnawing doubt, the same fear that these lines might be for nothing. You pause, wiping your face, and Yana's beside you, her own stone still moving. "This monkey's a pain," you grumble, hoping for a laugh. She doesn't smile, just keeps scraping, her eyes distant. "It's not just a monkey," she says, voice low. "It's a messenger. To the stars." You wait for her to explain, but she's focused, her hands steady despite the heat. A messenger? You think of Inti's doorway, of the spiral's hypnotic pull, and a chill runs through you, even as the sun burns your back. The Nazca saw animals as sacred, birds as sky messengers, spiders as weavers of life, monkeys as tricksters bridging earth and cosmos. Modern scholars, like Johann Reinhard, suggest the monkey might represent a constellation, maybe linked to the rainy season start. You've seen the stars at night, their patterns sharp and alive. Could this monkey be a plea to one of those patterns, a cry for water in a land that's forgotten how to cry? The thought drives you, and you scrape harder, ignoring the ache in your shoulders. The monkey's tail is taking shape, its curl tight and deliberate, like it's grasping at something unseen. You try to imagine it from above, a giant figure etched into the desert skin, visible only to the gods or the stars. The Nazca were masters of scale, their lines so precise they've lasted centuries, defying wind and time. Some researchers, like Clive Ruggles, argue their accuracy suggests advanced surveying skills, using ropes and stakes to map the desert. You're no engineer, but you feel the weight of their craft in every stroke, the way the lines seem to hum with purpose. The sun's at its peak now, searing your skin. Your throat's so dry you'd trade your soul for an iced coffee, but all you've got is a jug of warm water, passed around when Kusi's not looking. Yana hands it to you, her fingers rough from days of work. "Don't pass out," she says, her voice softer than usual. You take a sip, the water gritty but welcome, and ask, "You think this monkey's gonna save us?" She shrugs, spitting coca juice into the dirt. "It better. We're running out of time." Her words hang heavy, and you remember the village's lean years, the stories of hunger, of prayers unanswered. The monkey's not just a drawing, it's a gamble, a desperate bet against the desert's cruelty. Work drags on, the monkey's form emerging under your hands. Kusi's still shouting, but you've tuned him out, lost in the rhythm of scraping. The desert's quiet, save for the soft scrape of stones and the occasional cough from a dust-choked worker. It's almost peaceful, until a low murmur ripples through the crew. You look up to see a figure approaching, not Inti, but a woman, her face lined with age, her hair braided with beads. She's Mama Quilla, the village's healer, known for her herb poultices and her uncanny knack for reading omens. She rarely leaves her hut, so her presence feels like a crack in the day's routine. The crew slows, eyes darting, but no one speaks. Mama Quilla stops at the monkey's edge, her gaze sweeping over the lines. She kneels, pressing a hand to the dirt, and whispers something you can't hear. Kusi, for once, stays quiet, his usual bluster gone. You nudge Yana, whispering, "What's she doing?" Yana's eyes are wide, her coca leaves forgotten. "She's listening," she says. "To the earth, to the stars." You frown, unsure what that means, but the air feels heavier, like the desert's holding its breath. Mama Quilla rises, her beads clicking, and points to the monkey's tail. "It's not finished," she says, her voice sharp. "The stars won't hear it like this." The crew shifts, uneasy, and Kusi scrambles to adjust the ropes, muttering about perfection. You get back to work, Mama Quilla's words sinking in. The stars won't hear? You think of Inti's doorway, of the spiral's pull, and now this, a monkey that's not enough. The Nazca believed in balance, in giving as much as they took. Modern studies, like those by David Johnson, suggest some lines were tied to rituals, maybe even sacrifices, to ensure the gods' favor. Your stomach twists at the thought. Blood? Offerings? You glance at the monkey's tail, its curls suddenly ominous. What does it take to make the stars listen? And what happens if they don't? The day ends with the monkey nearly complete, its form stark against the desert floor. The crew gathers, staring at it in the fading light. It's beautiful, its limbs alive, its tail a defiant curl. But Mama Quilla's warning lingers, and no one speaks. You feel a strange mix of pride and dread, like you've built something sacred and dangerous. As you trudge back to the village, the air cools, carrying the scent of dust and distant fires. The stars are out, brighter than ever, and you search for the monkey's constellation, wondering if it's watching. Yana walks beside you, her silence heavier than usual. You think she's right? You ask, voice low. About the stars not hearing? She doesn't answer, just keeps walking, her coca pouch swinging. We'll find out, she says finally. We always do. Back at the hut, you collapse, the day's weight etched into your body. The wind stronger, rattling the walls, and you hear faint chanting from the village. Another prayer, another plea. You think of the monkey, its tail unfinished, and Mama Quilla's ominous words. Modern theories swirl, ritual maps, cosmic alignments, even whispers of ancient priests wielding power you can't imagine. But here now it's just you, the desert, and a sky that feels alive with expectation. You close your eyes, but the monkey's curl follows you into the dark, twisting, reaching. What does it take to make the stars here? And if they demand more than lines, are you ready to pay the price? You smirk into the darkness, thinking, if the gods want a messenger, they'd better send a clear signal, because you're not sure how much longer you can carve blind. The desert night is restless, the air thick with the scent of dust and the faint, bitter edge of dying fires. You lie on your straw mat, body bruised from carving the monkey's curling tail, mind buzzing with Mama Quilla's warning equals spiral warning. The stars won't hear. The wind howls outside, rattling the mud walls of your hut, carrying whispers of the village's chants, their voices rising and falling like waves. Your blisters burn, your muscles ache, and the gritty taste of dust coats your tongue, a constant reminder of the desert's grip. Yana's silence, her words about paying a price, haunts you, twisting with the image of the monkey's unfinished tale. Sleep feels like a distant dream, chased away by the stars pressing too close, their lights slicing through the cracks in your hut like blades. You roll over, trying to shut it all out, but the desert's alive tonight, and it's not letting you go. Morning comes sharp and brutal, the sun's first rays stabbing through the hut's gaps. You force yourself up, every joint creaking, and step outside. The village pulses with life. Women grind corn, their pestles thumping rhythmically. while kids dart between huts, their laughter a stark contrast to the weight in your chest. The air carries the faint sweetness of roasted maize, but it's drowned by the ever-present dust, settling in your throat with every breath. You grab a corn cake, its texture like chewing stone, and wash it down with water that tastes of earth and time. Yana's at her spot, chewing coca leaves, her eyes shadowed. "You look like you saw a ghost," she says, her half-smile not reaching her eyes. You mutter something about the monkey haunting you, but her laugh is hollow, and she nods toward the worksite. "Better get moving. Kussy's in a mood." Kussy's voice booms across the village, summoning the crew like a warlord. You trudge to the desert, the ground already warm under your raw feet. Today's task is a new figure, a condor, its wings stretched wide, beak sharp, like it's ready to tear into the sky. The crew gathers, tools in hand, and you feel the familiar dread settle in, heavier after Mama Quilla's visit. Kussy's waving a rope, his face red from shouting. "This condor's for the storm god," he barks. "Screw it up, and we're all lightning bait." You roll your eyes, thinking he's more likely to get struck by his own ego, but you kneel, stone in hand, and start scraping. The dust rises, stinging your eyes, coating your skin, a second skin you can't shed. The condor's shape is fierce, its lines angular and unforgiving. You drag the stone across the desert floor, peeling back dark pebbles to reveal pale earth. Each stroke is a battle, pain flaring from your wrists to your shoulders. The sun climbs, turning the desert into a forge, and your sweat mixes with the dirt, forming a gritty paste. You glance at the others, dozens of workers, their heads bowed, scraping in eerie sync, like a ritual carved into their bones. You wonder how many carry the same fear, the same question. What if the stars don't hear? The Nazca Lines are more than art. They're a lifeline, a plea to forces that might not care. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and Yana's beside you, her stone still moving. "This condor's a beast," you mutter, hoping for a spark of her usual sarcasm. She doesn't bite, just keeps scraping, her face tight. "It's a hunter," she says, voice low. "It carries our prayers to the storm." You wait for more, but she's focused, her hands steady despite the heat. A hunter? You think of Mama Quilla's warning, of Inti's doorway, and the monkey's unfinished ale. The Nazca saw condors as sacred, sky kings that soared between worlds, carrying messages to the gods. Modern scholars like Gary Urton suggest the condor might align with the Milky Way, a celestial river tied to rain and fertility. You've seen the Milky Way at night, a glowing band that feels alive, pulsing with secrets. Could this condor be a plea to that river, a cry for storms to break the desert's chokehold? The thought pushes you, and you scrape harder, ignoring the burn in your muscles. The condor's wings take shape, sharp and commanding, like they could slice the sky open. You try to picture it from above, a giant predator etched into the desert, visible only to the gods or the stars. The Nazca were precise, their lines enduring centuries, defying erosion. Some researchers, like Helene Silverman, argue their skill suggests a deep knowledge of geometry, using simple tools to map vast designs. You're no mathematician, but you feel their precision in every stroke, the way the lines hum with intent. The sun's at its zenith, roasting your skin. Your throat's so dry you'd trade your hut for a cold soda, but all you've got is a jug of warm water, passed when Kussy's not looking. Yana hands it over, her fingers rough. "Don't keel over," she says, her voice softer than usual. You take a sip, the water gritty but vital, and ask, "You think this condor's enough?" She shrugs, spitting coca juice into the dirt. "It has to be. We're out of options." Her words cut deep, and you think of the village's hunger, the dry riverbeds, the prayers that echo into silence. The condor's not just a drawing, it's a last stand, a desperate thrust against the desert's blade. Work grinds on, the condor's form emerging under your hands. Cussy's still shouting, but you've muted him, lost in the rhythm of scraping. The desert's quiet, save for the soft scrape of stones and the occasional grunt from a worker. It's almost serene, until a shadow falls over you. You look up to see Inti, the shaman, standing at the worksite's edge. His white hair glows in the sunlight, his staff tapping the ground like a heartbeat. The crew slows, glances exchanged, but no one speaks. Inti's rare visits carry weight, and after Mama Quilla's warning, his presence feels like a storm brewing. He steps closer, his eyes fixed on the condor, and stops beside you. You freeze, stone in hand, pulse racing. This condor, he says, his voice low, must fly true. The storm god is watching. You blink, waiting for more, but he's already moving on, his staff leaving small marks in the dirt. The crew watches him go, and Cussy, for once, stays quiet. You nudge Yana, whispering, "What's with these cryptic old folks?" She's tense, her coca leaves forgotten. "They know things," she says. "Things we're not ready for." You frown, the air heavier, like the desert's holding a secret. Inti's words sink in. The storm god is watching. You think of the condor's sharp beak, its wings poised for flight. Modern studies, like those by Johann Reinhard, suggest some lines were tied to weather rituals, maybe even offerings to coax the rains. Your stomach twists at the thought. Offerings? Blood? You glance at the condor's beak, its edge suddenly menacing. What does the storm god want? And what happens if it's not satisfied? The day ends with the condor nearly complete, its form stark against the desert floor. The crew gathers, staring at it in the fading light. It's majestic, its wings alive, its beak a silent challenge. But Inti's words linger, and no one speaks. You feel a mix of awe and fear, like you've summoned something too big to control. As you trudge back to the village, the air cools, carrying the scent of dust and distant smoke. The stars are out, sharp and unyielding, and you search for the Milky Way, wondering if the condors reached it. Yana walks beside you, her silence heavy. You think Inti's right? You ask, voice low. About the storm god? She doesn't look at you, just keeps walking. "I think we're running out of time to find out," she says, her voice barely a whisper. Back at the hut, you collapse, the day's weight crushing you. The wind's fierce, shaking the walls, and you hear faint drums from the village. Another ritual, another plea. You think of the condor, its wings spread, and Inti's warning. Modern theories swirl, weather maps, celestial alignments, even whispers of ancient priests wielding power beyond your grasp. But here, now it's just you, the desert, and a sky that feels alive with hunger. You close your eyes, but the condor's beak follows you into the dark, sharp and waiting. What does it take to summon a storm? And if the gods demand more than lines, are you ready to give it? You smirk into the darkness, thinking, if the storm god wants a show, it better bring the thunder, because you're not sure how much longer you can bleed for the sky. You're still here, right? That makes me grin. If something in this story's grabbed you, or if there's a question dancing in your head right now, toss it in the comments. I'm dying to hear what you're thinking. Now, let's not keep you waiting. Take a deep breath, settle in, and let's dive into the next chapter of this journey. Things are about to get even wilder. The desert night is a restless beast, its breath hot and heavy with the scent of dust and the fading tang of village fires. You're sprawled on your straw mat, body battered from carving the condor's fierce wings, mind tangled in Inti's cryptic warning. The storm god is watching. The wind howls outside, shaking the mud walls of your hut, carrying the faint, rhythmic chants of the village's latest ritual. Your blisters pulse, your throat's raw from endless dust, and Yana's quiet dread. We're running out of time. Claws at you. sleep is a cruel tease, chased away by the stars' relentless glare, their light slicing through the cracks like they're daring you to look up. You roll over, trying to escape, but the desert's got you in its grip, and the condor's sharp beak haunts your dreams, poised to strike. Dawn breaks like a blade, the sun's first rays searing through the hut's gaps. You drag yourself up, muscles screaming, joints creaking like they're begging for mercy. Outside, the village hums, women pound corn, their pestles thumping in steady rhythm, while kids weave through the huts, their laughter sharp against the weight in your chest. The air's thick with a faint sweetness of roasted maize, but it's undercut by the ever-present dust, coating your tongue with every breath. You grab a corn cake, its texture like gnawing on a rock, and force it down with water that tastes of clay and centuries. Yana's at her usual spot, chewing coca leaves, her eyes shadowed with something heavier than exhaustion. "You're still kicking," she says, her half-smile faint. "Thought the condor might have eaten you." You mutter something about needing a break, but her laugh is thin, and she nods toward the worksite. "No breaks. Not today." Kusi's voice cuts through the village like a whip, summoning the crew. You trudge to the desert, the ground already warm under your raw, blistered feet. Today's task is a new figure, a hummingbird, its delicate lines a stark contrast to the condor's brutal majesty. The crew gathers, tools in hand, and you feel the familiar dread settle in, sharper after Inti's visit and Mama Quilla's warning. Kusi's waving a rope, his face flushed from shouting. "This hummingbird's for the rain god," he barks. "One mistake, and we're all dust." You roll your eyes, thinking he's more likely to turn you to dust with his endless yelling, but you kneel, stone in hand, and start scraping. The dust rises, stinging your eyes, clogging your nose, painting your skin in gritty layers. The hummingbird's shape is intricate, its wings a delicate curve, its beak a fine point, like it's sipping from an invisible flower. You drag the stone across the desert floor, peeling back dark pebbles to reveal pale earth. Each stroke is a test, pain flaring from your wrists to your shoulders, your hands raw from days of work. The sun climbs, turning the desert into a furnace, and your sweat mixes with the dirt, forming a muddy crust on your arms. You glance at the others, dozens of workers, their heads bowed, scraping in eerie unison, like they're part of the desert itself. You wonder how many share your doubt, your fear that these lines might be a plea to a sky that's gone deaf. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and Yana's beside you, her stone still moving. "This hummingbird's a pain," you grumble, hoping for a spark of her usual wit. She doesn't smile, just keeps scraping, her face tight. "It's a guide," she says, voice low, "to the rain." You wait for more, but she's focused, her hands steady despite the heat. A guide? You think of Inti's storm god, Mama Quilla's warning about the stars, and the monkey's unfinished tale. The Nazca saw hummingbirds as sacred, delicate messengers darting between earth and sky, carrying prayers for water. Modern scholars like Maria Reich suggest the hummingbird might align with the equinox, its beak pointing to where the sun rises when day and night balance, signaling the rainy season's approach. You've seen the equinox sky, the stars sharp and alive, promising change. Could this hummingbird be a plea to that moment, a cry for the rains to break the desert's grip? The thought fuels you, and you scrape harder, ignoring the burn in your muscles. The hummingbird's wings take shape, delicate and precise, like they could flutter free. You try to picture it from above, a tiny figure etched into the desert skin, visible only to the gods or the stars. The Nazca were masters of precision, their lines enduring centuries, defying wind and time. Some researchers, like Anthony Avini, argue their designs reflect a deep understanding of the cosmos, mapping celestial cycles onto the earth. You're no astronomer, but you feel their intent in every stroke, the way the lines seem to pulse with purpose. The sun's at its peak, searing your skin. Your throat's so dry you'd trade your soul for an iced tea, but all you've got is a jug of warm water. Passed when Kussy's not looking. Yana hands it over, her fingers rough from work. "Don't faint," she says, her voice softer than usual. You take a sip, the water gritty, but vital, and ask, "You think this hummingbird's gonna save us?" She shrugs, spitting coca juice into the dirt. "It better. The river's almost gone." Her words hit hard, and you think of the village's dry season, the cracked riverbeds, the hunger that waits like a predator. The hummingbird's not just a drawing. It's a prayer, a fragile hope against the desert's wrath. Work grinds on, the hummingbird's form emerging under your hands. Kussy's still shouting, but you've tuned him out, lost in the rhythm of scraping. The desert's quiet, save for the soft scrape of stones and the occasional cough from a dust-choked worker. It's almost meditative, until a low murmur ripples through the crew. You look up to see a figure approaching, not Inti or Mama Quilla, but a young man barely older than you. His face gaunt, his eyes wild. He's Pasha, a runner who carries messages between villages, known for his speed and his unsettling stories of omens. He rarely stops long, so his presence feels like a crack in the day's rhythm. The crew slows, eyes darting, but no one speaks. Pasha stops at the hummingbird's edge, his breath ragged, his hands trembling. He scans the lines, then locks eyes with Kussy. "The river's failing," he says, voice sharp. "The elders say the stars are angry." The crew shifts, uneasy, and Kussy's usual bluster falters. You nudge Yana, whispering, "What's he mean angry?" She's tense, her coca leaves forgotten. "It means we're not doing enough," she says. "The lines, the prayers, they're not enough." You frown, the air heavier, like the desert's tightening its grip. Pasha's words sink in, "The stars are angry." You think of Inti's storm god, Mama Quilla's warning, and now this. Modern studies, like those by David Johnson, suggest some lines were tied to water rituals, maybe even sacrifices to appease the gods. Your stomach twists. Sacrifices? More than lines? You glance at the hummingbird's beak, its delicate point suddenly ominous. You get back to work, Pasha's words burning in your mind. The hummingbird's nearly done, its wings perfect, its beak sharp. Kussy's pushing harder now, his voice cracking with urgency. The day ends with the crew gathering, staring at the hummingbird in the fading light. It's beautiful, its lines alive, like it's ready to fly. But Pasha's warning lingers, and no one speaks. You feel a mix of awe and dread, like you've crafted something sacred and perilous. As you trudge back to the village, the air cools, carrying the scent of dust and distant smoke. The stars are out, brighter than ever, and you search for the equinox point, wondering if the hummingbirds reached it. Yana walks beside you, her silence heavy. "You think Pasha's right?" you ask, voice low. "About the stars?" She doesn't look at you, just keeps walking. "I think we're about to find out," she says, her voice barely audible. Back at the hut, you collapse, the day's weight crushing you. The wind's fierce, shaking the walls, and you hear faint drums from the village. Another ritual, another plea. You think of the hummingbird, its wings poised, and Pasha's warning. Modern theories swirl, water maps, cosmic alignments, even whispers of ancient rites you can't fathom. But here, now it's just you, the desert, and a sky that feels alive with rage. You close your eyes, but the hummingbird's beak follows you into the dark, sharp and waiting. What does it take to calm the stars? And if they demand more than lines, are you ready to pay? You smirk into the darkness, thinking, if the gods want blood, they better send a memo, because you're not sure how much longer you can carve blind. The desert night is a suffocating shroud, thick with the scent of dust and the bitter remnants of village fires. You're sprawled on your straw mat, body broken from carving the hummingbird's delicate wings, mind reeling from Pasha's warning. The stars are angry. The wind howls outside, rattling the mud walls of your hut, carrying the faint, desperate chants of the village's latest ritual. Your blisters throb, your throat's raw from days of choking dust, and Yana's quiet dread. We're about to find out, gnaws at you. Sleep is a cruel phantom, chased away by the stars' relentless glare, their light piercing the cracks in your hut like they're demanding answers. You roll over, trying to block it out, but the desert's alive, its pulse syncing with your own, and the hummingbird's sharp beak lingers in your mind, poised to pierce something you can't name. Dawn cracks open the sky, the sun's first rays slicing through the hut's gaps like a blade. You drag yourself up, muscles screaming, joints grinding like they're ready to quit. Outside, the village stirs, women pound corn, their pestles thumping in steady rhythm, while kids dart between huts, their laughter a fragile shield against the tension in the air. The faint sweetness of roasted maize hangs heavy, but it's drowned by the ever-present dust, coating your tongue with every breath. You grab a corn cake, its texture like biting into stone, and force it down with water that tastes of clay and despair. Yana's at her usual spot, chewing coca leaves, her eyes hollow. "You're still here," she says, her voice flat. "Thought the stars might have taken you." You mutter something about wishing they would, but her half-smile is grim, and she nods toward the worksite. "Come on. It's not over yet." Kusi's voice rips through the village, summoning the crew like a tyrant. You trudge to the desert, the ground already warm under your raw, blistered feet. Today's task is a new figure, a pelican, its beak wide, wings arched like it's diving for something sacred. The crew gathers, tools in hand, and you feel the dread settle deeper, sharpened by Pasha's words and the village's growing fear. Kusi's waving a rope, his face taut with something more than his usual arrogance. "This pelican's for the water god," he shouts. "One slip and we're all doomed." You roll your eyes, thinking he's more likely to doom you with his panic, but you kneel, stone in hand, and start scraping. The dust rises, stinging your eyes, clogging your nose, painting your skin in gritty layers. The pelican's shape is bold, its lines sweeping and deliberate, like it's claiming the desert for itself. You drag the stone across the ground, peeling back dark pebbles to reveal pale earth. Each stroke is a battle, pain flaring from your wrists to your shoulders, your hands raw from weeks of work. The sun climbs, turning the desert into a crucible, and your sweat mixes with the dirt, forming a muddy crust on your arms. You glance at the others, dozens of workers, their heads bowed, scraping in eerie silence, like they're praying with every stroke. You wonder how many feel the same fear, the same question. What if the stars are done listening? The Nazca Lines are more than drawings. They're a contract, a desperate bargain with a sky that might have turned its back. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and Yana's beside you, her stone still moving. "This pelican's a monster," you grumble, hoping for a spark of her usual bite. She doesn't smile, just keeps scraping, her face tight. "It's a bringer," she says, voice low. "Of water, of life." You wait for more, but she's focused, her hands steady despite the heat. A bringer? You think of Pasha's warning, Inti's storm god, Mama Quilla's ominous words. The Nazca saw pelicans as sacred, coastal birds that dove into the sea, pulling life from its depths. Modern scholars, like Helene Silverman, suggest the pelican might symbolize abundance, its beak aligned with underground water sources like the Puquios. You've seen the Puquios, hidden channels that carry water from distant mountains, lifelines in a land that hoards its secrets. Could this pelican be a plea to those channels, a cry to keep them flowing? The thought drives you, and you scrape harder, ignoring the burn in your muscles. The pelican's wings take shape broad and commanding, like they could scoop the sky itself. You try to picture it from above, a giant figure etched into the desert skin, visible only to the gods or the stars. The Nazca were relentless, their lines enduring centuries, defying time. Some researchers, like Rosa Lasapanara, argue their designs mapped water systems, guiding the thirsty to hidden springs. You're no hydrologist, but you feel their desperation in every stroke, the way the lines seem to beg for mercy. The sun's at its zenith, roasting your skin. Your throat's so dry you'd trade your soul for a cold soda, but all you've got is a jug of warm water, passed when Kusi's not looking. Yana hands it over, her fingers rough. "Don't die," she says, her voice softer than usual. You take a sip, the water gritty but vital, and ask, "You think this pelican's enough?" She shrugs, spitting coca juice into the dirt. "It has to be. The village can't take another dry season." Her words cut deep, and you think of the failing river, the hunger waiting like a shadow, the prayers that dissolve into silence. The pelican's not just a drawing. It's a lifeline, a last plea to a god that might not care. Work grinds on, the pelican's form emerging under your hands. Kusi's still shouting, his voice cracking with urgency, and you've tuned him out, lost in the rhythm of scraping. The desert's quiet, save for the soft scrape of stones and the occasional cough from a dust-choked worker. It's almost hypnotic, until a low murmur ripples through the crew. You look up to see a figure approaching, not Inti, Mamaquilla, or Pasha, but an elder, his face weathered, his eyes sharp. He's Tupa, the old worker who spoke of his grandfather and the living lines. He rarely speaks now, so his presence feels like a stone dropped into still water. The crew slows, eyes darting, but no one speaks. Tupa stops at the pelican's edge, his gaze sweeping over the lines. He kneels, pressing a hand to the dirt, and mutters something under his breath. Kusi, for once, stays quiet, his usual bravado gone. You nudge Yana, whispering, "What's he doing?" She's tense, her coca leaves forgotten. "He's asking," she says, "for forgiveness." You frown, the air heavier, like the desert's tightening its grip. Forgiveness? You think of Pasha's angry stars, Inti's storm god, Mamaquilla's warning. Modern studies, like those by Gary Urton, suggest some lines were tied to rituals, maybe even offerings to balance the cosmic scales. Your stomach twists. Offerings? Blood? You glance at the pelican's beak, its wide gape suddenly menacing. What does forgiveness cost? And who pays it? You get back to work, Tupa's presence lingering like a shadow. The pelican's nearly done, its wings perfect, its beak open like a demand. Kusi's pushing harder now, his voice raw with fear. The day ends with the crew gathering, staring at the pelican in the fading light. It's stunning, its lines alive, like it's ready to dive. But Tupa's muttered prayer hangs heavy, and no one speaks. You feel a mix of awe and dread, like you've crafted something sacred and dangerous. As you trudge back to the village, the air cools, carrying the scent of dust and distant smoke. The stars are out, sharper than ever, and you search for the Pucchio's source, wondering if the pelicans reached it. Yana walks beside you, her silence heavier than usual. "You think Tupa's right?" you ask, voice low. "About forgiveness?" She doesn't look at you, just keeps walking. "I think we're running out of things to give," she says, her voice barely audible. Back at the hut, you collapse, the day's weight crushing you. The wind's fierce, shaking the walls, and you hear faint drums from a village. Another ritual, another plea. You think of the pelican, its beak wide, and Tupa's quiet prayer. Modern theories swirl, water maps, ritual offerings, even whispers of ancient priests wielding power you can't grasp. But here now it's just you, the desert, and a sky that feels alive with judgment. You close your eyes, but the pelican's beak follows you into the dark, open and waiting. What does it take to earn forgiveness? And if the gods demand more than lines, are you ready to pay? You smirk into the darkness, thinking, if the water god wants a sacrifice, it better send a sign, because you're not sure how much longer you can bleed for the desert. The desert night is a heavy veil, thick with the scent of dust and the acrid ghosts of village fires. You're sprawled on your straw mat, body shattered from carving the pelican's wide beak, mind trapped in Tupa's whispered prayer for forgiveness. The wind howls outside, rattling the mud walls of your hut, carrying the faint, desperate pulse of the village's chants. Your blisters burn, your throat's raw from weeks of choking dust, and Yana's chilling words, "We're running out of things to give," coil around you like a noose. Sleep is a cruel mirage, chased away by the stars' relentless stare, their light slicing through the cracks in your hut like they're demanding blood. You roll over, trying to shut it out, but the desert's alive, its heartbeat pounding in your chest, and the pelican's open beak lingers in your mind, gaping like a judgment. Dawn breaks with a ruthless edge, the sun's first rays clawing through the hut's gaps. You drag yourself up, muscles screaming, joints grinding like they're ready to surrender. Outside, the village hums with strained life. Women pound corn, their pestles thumping in weary rhythm, while kids dart between huts, their laughter brittle against the growing dread. The air carries the faint sweetness of roasted maize, but it's overwhelmed by the ever-present dust, coating your tongue with every breath. You grab a corn cake, its texture like chewing gravel, and force it down with water that tastes of clay and fear. Yana's at her spot, chewing coca leaves, her eyes sunken, like she's seen the future and it's not kind. "You're still breathing," she says, her voice flat. "Didn't think the pelican would let you sleep." You mutter something about wishing it had, but her half smile is grim, and she nods toward the worksite. "Move." Kussi's losing it. Kussi's voice tears through the village like a storm, summoning the crew with a desperation you haven't heard before. You trudge to the desert, the ground already warm under your raw, blistered feet. Today's task is a new figure, a whale, its massive form sprawling, tail curved like it's swimming through the stars. The crew gathers, tools in hand, and you feel the dreads sink deeper, sharpened by Tupa's prayer and the village's mounting fear. Kussi's waving a rope, his face pale, eyes wild. "This whale's for the deep god," he shouts. "One mistake, and we're all swallowed." You roll your eyes, thinking he's more likely to swallow you with his panic, but you kneel, stone in hand, and start scraping. The dust rises, stinging your eyes, clogging your nose, painting your skin in gritty layers. The whale's shape is vast, its lines broad and flowing, like it's carrying the weight of the ocean itself. You drag the stone across the desert floor, peeling back dark pebbles to reveal pale earth. Each stroke is a war, pain flaring from your wrists to your shoulders, your hands raw from months of work. The sun climbs, turning the desert into a crucible, and your sweat mixes with the dirt, forming a muddy crust on your arms. You glance at the others, dozens of workers, their heads bowed, scraping in eerie silence, like they're offering their souls with every stroke. You wonder how many share your terror, your question. What if the stars demand more than we can give? The Nazca Lines are more than art. They're a sacrifice, a desperate plea to a sky that might already be deaf. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and Yana's beside you, her stone still moving. "This whale's endless," you grumble, hoping for a flicker of her usual fire. She doesn't smile, just keeps scraping, her face taut. "It's a keeper," she says, voice low. "Of secrets, of water." You wait for more, but she's focused, her hands steady despite the heat. A keeper? You think of Tupa's prayer, Pasha's angry stars, Inti's storm god. The Nazca saw whales as sacred, ocean giants that held the mysteries of life, their forms tied to the deep currents that fed rivers. Modern scholars like Clive Ruggles suggest the whale might align with the Southern Cross, a constellation guiding the rainy season start. You've seen the Southern Cross at night, its stars sharp and steady, like a promise. Could this whale be a plea to that constellation, a cry to unlock the desert's hidden waters? The thought pushes you, and you scrape harder, ignoring the burn in your muscles. The whale's tail takes shape, its curve bold and deliberate, like it's pulling something from the deep. You try to picture it from above, a massive figure etched into the desert skin, visible only to the gods or the stars. The Nazca were relentless, their lines enduring centuries, defying time. Some researchers, like David Johnson, argue their designs mapped underground water systems, guiding the desperate to hidden pukios. You're no engineer, but you feel their urgency in every stroke, the way the lines seem to beg for salvation. The sun's at its peak, searing your skin. Your throat's so dry you'd trade your soul for a cold drink, but all you've got is a jug of warm water, passed when Kussi's not looking. Yana hands it over, her fingers rough. "Don't collapse," she says, her voice softer than usual. You take a sip, the water gritty, but vital, and ask, "You think this whale's enough?" She shrugs, spitting coca juice into the dirt. "It better be. The village is breaking." Her words cut deep, and you think of the failing river, the hunger stalking the huts, the prayers that vanish into silence. The whale's not just a drawing, it's a last hope, a desperate thrust against the desert's blade. Work grinds on, the whale's form emerging under your hands. Kussi's still shouting, his voice raw with fear, and you've tuned him out, lost in the rhythm of scraping. The desert's quiet, save for the soft scrape of stones and the occasional cough from a dust-choked worker. It's almost trance-like, until a low murmur ripples through the crew. You look up to see a figure approaching, not Tupa, Inti, or Pasha, but a woman, her face lined with age, her eyes sharp as flint. She's Illa, the village's storyteller, known for her tales of gods and heroes, her voice weaving hope and fear in equal measure. She rarely leaves the fire circle, so her presence feels like a crack in the desert's rhythm. The crew slows, eyes darting, but no one speaks. Illa stops at the whale's edge, her gaze sweeping over the lines. She kneels, pressing a hand to the dirt, and sings softly, of a melody that hums with power. Kussi, for once, stays quiet, his usual bravado gone. You nudge Yana, whispering, "What's she doing?" She's tense, her coca leaves forgotten. "She's calling," she says, "to the deep." You frown, the air heavier, like the desert's holding its breath. Calling? You think of Tupa's prayer, Pasha's angry stars, Inti's storm god. Modern studies, like those by Johann Reinhard, suggest some lines were tied to water rituals, maybe even offerings to coax the deep currents. Your stomach twists. Offerings? More than dirt? You glance at the whale's tail, its curve suddenly ominous. What does the deep god want? And who answers its call? You get back to work, Illa's song lingering like a shadow. The whale's nearly done, its tail perfect, its body vast. Kussi's pushing harder now, his voice cracking with urgency. The day ends with the crew gathering, staring at the whale in the fading light. It's breathtaking, its lines alive, like it's swimming through the stars. But Illa's song hangs heavy, and no one speaks. You feel a mix of awe and dread, like you've summoned something too vast to control. As you trudge back to the village, the air cools, carrying the scent of dust and distant smoke. The stars are out, sharper than ever, and you search for the Southern Cross, wondering if the whales reached it. Yana walks beside you, her silence heavier than usual. You think Illa's right? You ask, voice low. About the deep? She doesn't look at you, just keeps walking. I think we're calling something we can't stop, she says, her voice barely audible. Back at the hut, you collapse, the day's weight crushing you. The wind's fierce, shaking the walls, and you hear faint drums from the village. Another ritual, another plea. You think of the whale, its tail curved, and Illa's haunting song. Modern theories swirl, water maps, cosmic alignments, even whispers of ancient rites you can't fathom. But here, now it's just you, the desert, and a sky that feels alive with hunger. You close your eyes, but the whale's tail follows you into the dark, curling, pulling. What does it take to reach the deep? And if the gods demand more than lines, are you ready to give it? You smirk into the darkness, thinking, if the deep god wants a keeper, it better send a clear signal, because you're not sure how much longer you can carve blind. The desert night is a living thing, its breath heavy with the scent of dust and the fading embers of village fires. You're sprawled on your straw mat, body broken from carving the whale's vast tail, mind ensnared by Illa's haunting song and Yana's chilling words. We're calling something we can't stop. The wind howls outside, shaking the mud walls of your hut, carrying the faint, desperate rhythm of the village's chants. Your blisters pulse, your throat's raw from months of choking dust, and the weight of the lines, spider, bird, monkey, whale, presses down like a stone. Sleep is a cruel illusion, chased away by the stars' unyielding glare, their light slicing through the cracks like they're demanding your soul. You roll over, trying to escape, but the desert's got you, its pulse pounding in your veins, and the whale's curving tail lingers in your mind, pulling you towards something vast and unknowable. Dawn breaks with a merciless edge, the sun's first rays clawing through the hut's gaps. You drag yourself up, muscles screaming, joints grinding like they're ready to give up. Outside, the village is tense. Women pound corn, their pestles thumping in strained rhythm, while kids move quietly, their usual laughter muted by the fear hanging over the huts. The air carries the faint sweetness of roasted maize, but it's drowned by the ever-present dust, coating your tongue with every breath. You grab a corn cake, its texture like biting into despair, and force it down with water that tastes of clay and time. Yana's at her spot, chewing coca leaves, her eyes hollow, like she's staring into the abyss. You're still here, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Thought the whale might have swallowed you. You mutter something about wishing it had, but her half-smile is grim, and she nods toward the worksite. Last one. Let's finish it. Kusi's voice cuts through the village, weaker now, laced with exhaustion rather than bravado. You trudge to the desert, the ground warm under your raw, blistered feet. Today's task is the final figure, a tree, its branches reaching like fingers toward the sky, roots sprawling like they're drinking from the earth's heart. The crew gathers, tools in hand, and you feel the dread sharpen, fueled by Illa's song, Tupa's prayer, Pasha's warning. Kusi's holding a rope, his face gaunt, eyes darting. This tree's for the life god, he says, voice cracking. Get it wrong and we're done. You roll your eyes, thinking he's already done you in with his endless fear, but you kneel, stone in hand, and start scraping. The dust rises, stinging your eyes, clogging your nose, painting your skin in gritty layers. The tree's shape is complex, its branches delicate, its roots deep and twisting, like it's holding the desert together. You drag the stone across the ground, peeling back dark pebbles to reveal pale earth. Each stroke is a battle, pain flaring from your wrists to your shoulders, your hands raw from a season of work. The sun climbs, turning the desert into a furnace, and your sweat mixes with the dirt, forming a muddy crust on your arms. You glance at the others, dozens of workers, their heads bowed, scraping in eerie silence, like they're pouring their lives into the lines. You wonder how many share your terror, your question. What if this is all we have left? The Nazca Lines are more than drawings, they're a final offering. a desperate plea to a sky that might have turned away. You pause, wiping sweat from your brow, and Yana's beside you, her stone still moving. "This tree's killing me," you grumble, hoping for a spark of her usual fire. She doesn't smile, just keeps scraping, her face taut. "It's an anchor," she says, voice low. "For life. For water." You wait for more, but she's focused, her hands steady despite the heat. An anchor? You think of Illasong, Tupa's prayer, Pasha's angry stars. The Nazca saw trees as sacred, symbols of life rooted in the earth, their branches touching the cosmos. Modern scholars, like Anthony Avini, suggest the tree might align with the solstice, its branches pointing to where the sun rises when the rains return. You've seen the solstice sky, its stars sharp and alive, promising renewal. Could this tree be a plea to that moment, a cry to hold the desert's life together? The thought drives you, and you scrape harder, ignoring the burn in your muscles. The tree's branches take shape, delicate and reaching, like they're grasping for hope. You try to picture it from above, a sprawling figure etched into the desert skin, visible only to the gods or the stars. The Nazca were masters of endurance, their lines lasting centuries, defying time. Some researchers, like Rosa Lasapanara, argue their designs mapped water systems, guiding the desperate to hidden pukios. You're no hydrologist, but you feel their desperation in every stroke, the way the lines seem to plead for mercy. The sun's at its peak, searing your skin. Your throat's so dry you'd trade your soul for a cold drink, but all you've got is a jug of warm water, passed when Kusi's not looking. Yana hands it over, her fingers rough. "Don't die," she says, her voice softer than usual. You take a sip, the water gritty but vital, and ask, "You think this tree's enough?" She shrugs, spitting coca juice into the dirt. "It has to be. There's nothing left." Her words cut deep, and you think of the failing river, the hunger clawing at the village, the prayers that dissolve into silence. The tree's not just a drawing, it's a last stand, a final plea to a god that might not answer. Work grinds on, the tree's form emerging under your hands. Kusi's still muttering, his voice raw with fear, and you've tuned him out, lost in the rhythm of scraping. The desert's quiet, save for the soft scrape of stones and the occasional cough from a dust-choked worker. It's almost meditative, until a low murmur ripples through the crew. You look up to see a figure approaching, not Illa, Tupa, or Pasha, but Inti, the shaman, his white hair glowing in the sunlight, his staff tapping the ground like a heartbeat. The crew slows, eyes darting, but no one speaks. Inti's presence is a storm cloud, heavy with meaning, and after all the warnings, it feels like the sky itself is watching. Inti stops at the tree's edge, his gaze sweeping over the lines. He kneels, pressing a hand to the dirt, and speaks softly, his voice carrying a weight that silences the desert. "This tree," he says, "is our last root. It holds us to the earth, to the stars." You freeze, stone in hand, pulse racing. Last root? You think of Illasong, Tupa's prayer, Pasha's angry stars. Modern studies, like those by Gary Urton, suggest some lines were tied to rituals, maybe even offerings to balance the cosmic scales. Your stomach twists. Offerings? More than dirt? You glance at the tree's roots, their sprawl suddenly ominous. What does the life God want? And who pays for it? You get back to work, Inti's words burning in your mind. The tree's nearly done, its branches perfect, its roots deep. Kusi's pushing harder now, his voice cracking with urgency. The day ends with the crew gathering, staring at the tree in the fading light. It's breathtaking, its lines alive, like it's breathing with the desert. But Inti's words hang heavy, and no one speaks. You feel a mix of awe and dread, like you've anchored something sacred and perilous. As you trudge back to the village, the air cools, carrying the scent of dust and distant smoke. The stars are out, sharper than ever, and you search for the solstice point, wondering if the trees reached it. Yana walks beside you, her silence heavier than ever. "You think Inti's right?" you ask, voice low. "About the last route?" She doesn't look at you, just keeps walking. "I think we've given all we can," she says, her voice barely audible. The village is quiet that night, the chants replaced by an eerie stillness. You collapse in your hut, the day's weight crushing you. The wind's gentle now, whispering through the walls, and you hear no drums, no prayers. You think of the tree, its branches reaching, and Inti's final words. The lines spider, bird, monkey, whale, tree are complete, a vast canvas etched into the desert, a plea to the stars that might never answer. Modern theories swirl, water maps, cosmic alignments, rituals of blood and balance, but they feel distant, like echoes from another time. Here now it's just you, the desert, and a sky that feels both alive and indifferent. You close your eyes, and for the first time in weeks, sleep comes, heavy and dreamless. The next morning, you wake to a strange sound, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. You step outside, and the village is alive, faces turned upward. Rain. Tiny drops kiss the dust, turning it to mud, a miracle you'd stopped believing in. Yana's there, her coca leaves forgotten, her eyes bright with something like hope. The lines worked, or the gods listened, or the stars answered. You'll never know why, but the desert's alive, and so are you. And so, we've reached the end of our tale, the final step of the journey we've shared. I want to take a moment to thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for staying with me until now. Every chapter, every scene, every word. It's all meant more, because you were here to experience it. As we close the book tonight, I hope you feel a little lighter, a little calmer. I wish you a restful evening, a peaceful sleep, and the sweetest dreams to carry you through the night. We'll meet again in another story, another time, and I'm truly looking forward to it. If this journey touched you in some way, don't hesitate to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know what stayed with you, what made you pause, or smile, or wonder. Until next time, sleep well, dream sweetly, and I'll see you in the next adventure.